Hello and welcome to Kaleidoscope with me, Savithri Rodrigo. This week we are covering quite a bit of ground, from how shipping is navigating new waters with past chair of the Sri Lanka Logistics and Freight Forwarders Association, Tania Polonovita Vettimuni, representative of UNICEF Sri Lanka, Tim Sutton, and his opinion of Sri Lanka's vaccination record. The first Sri Lankan to win the Diana Award, Shiranthi Senanayake, speaks about her youth empowerment work. And giving you an adrenaline rush as e-racing gathers speed is president of the Ceylon Motorsports Club, Niroshan Pereira. And that's all on our People's Bank News Capsule. On Selinko Live, Let's Talk, feminist writer, activist and consultant Sharanya Sekaram tackles Sri Lanka's sexual pandemic. And we sit at the Asylum Lounge Bar and Restaurant for a sip of their signature Love Ceylon cocktail in Life in 60. And there's lots more. But first, here's your People's Bank News Capsule.
Technology is key in moving forward to transform every challenging moment into a profit, where manual becomes digital, business becomes smart, and lives become smarter. People's Bank Online Corporate Banking. It's truly the change you need.
And so, we begin with our People's Bank News Capsule. Fitch Ratings dished out some challenging news for Sri Lankan corporates this week, stating that top lines could drop by as much as 30 billion rupees, a 7% decline due to COVID-19. The hardest hit would be the hotel sector, followed by consumer durables and alcoholic beverages. While the rest of the world locked down, one of the industries that couldn't close was the shipping industry. And here to explain how COVID-19 will be the catalyst for change in the shipping and freight forwarding industry is Tania Polonovita Vettimuni, former chairperson of the Sri Lanka Logistics and Freight Forwarders Association and Group MD of IAS Holdings.
The visible change in the industry is that private sector and the board agencies embracing e-documentation and digitalization to facilitate the seamless and uninterrupted services at ground level. Yet, industry suffers from not having single window and connecting all stakeholders to offer efficient and real-time optimum services at ground level. Manual processes to be seriously looked into for an alternative at customs, port, airport, more online remote procedures to be included, and integration of more digitalized and paperless workflows. Many sourcing companies are looking into near sourcing, creating reduction in volumes which impact industry heavily. From a customer's point of view, most are revisiting or re-engineering supply chain in order to meet the sudden change in the marketplace. Many will move into a VMI model to focus core businesses in order to have a leaner model.
This week, the Colombo Stock Exchange continued its bearish sentiments, which has been the pattern from a couple of weeks ago. The indices moved up by 1.1%, however, daily turnover dropped to 906 million rupees. Gold hit a 9-year high on Wednesday in India, the world's second largest gold consumer after China, as a host of factors like global uncertainties triggered by the COVID pandemic, a weak dollar, low interest rates and stimulus programs have increased the appetite for gold. Gold futures prices soared to a 9-year high of $1,856 per troy ounce in London, inching closer to a record high of $1,920, which it hit in September 2011. Sri Lanka is one country that can boast of universal immunization. However, globally, the story is different. Before COVID-19, vaccine coverage stalled at 85% and has been at that rate for nearly a decade. I asked representative of UNICEF Sri Lanka, Tim Sutton, why that is so.
Well, COVID-19 is the reason it's plateaued since COVID-19. There were other reasons that meant that vaccination programs had not been as strong over recent years. There's been an anti-vaxxer movement in many countries. There's been a decrease in investment in vaccination programs in many countries. But Sri Lanka is always the exception when it comes to immunisation programs. Sri Lanka hasn't had a fall off in immunisations before the COVID-19, and while COVID-19 has interrupted, that was only for a short time, and by April 20th services had resumed, and by May, the beginning of May, the backlog of immunisations had been caught up. Sri Lanka does immunisation very, very well, and always has. I mean, even during the civil war and the time of the tsunami, Sri Lanka made sure they vaccinated every child, no matter where they were on the map of Sri Lanka. They made sure we started the process of negotiating days of tranquility to allow vaccinations to happen. So Sri Lanka has a proud record in this area and has done extremely well.
And on the subject of Sri Lanka's superior healthcare, Hema's hospitals proved that they are innovating and designed the world's first infectious patient transportation chamber to fight COVID-19. A sealed chamber on wheels, the chamber transports COVID-19 patients, ensuring the safety of hospital frontline workers and other patients. Enjoying your work also means enjoying where you work. Selinco Life is one of those places. The company was certified as a great workplace by Global Authority on Workplace Culture, Great Places to Work. Selinco Life also scored higher than the averages achieved in 2019 by the 25 best workplaces in Sri Lanka. Shiranti Senanayake became the first Sri Lankan to win the Diana Award presented in memory of Princess Diana. It's given to outstanding young people who are selflessly creating positive social change. Shiranti is the founder-president of HYPE Sri Lanka, Sri Lanka's first youth empowerment incubator. She's also the founder-president of the Young Legal Professionals Association of Sri Lanka and global ambassador for Sri Lanka for Youth Opportunities. She's won the Women Deliver Young Leader Award 2020 as well, and Shiranti holds an LLB and a bachelor's in Development Policy and Management Economics, and she spoke to Kaleidoscope about her plans.
I started my volunteer journey back in 2009 when a group of us travelled to a rehabilitation centre in Mullaitivu for former female child soldiers of the LTTE. From there onwards, I worked with various stakeholders in the youth developmental system. And I realized that there is a need in Sri Lanka for what we in the field call youth empowerment incubation. So that is why I started Sri Lanka's first and only youth empowerment incubator, HYPE Sri Lanka. I would like to share two projects that we're hoping to carry out, or rather we're carrying out and hoping to expand in the future. The first project is called Project Nexus. Here we try to register all the youth organizations that are operating in Sri Lanka and divide them into clusters. And through an intercluster and intra-cluster networking, we want to create sustainable partnerships amongst the existing initiatives. And the second project is the HYPE Policy Tank. This is a purely volunteer-run policy tank which focuses on facilitating the youth policy development cycle of Sri Lanka. My vision in life is to create an environment which empowers young people to reach their goals and to be the best versions of themselves.
If racing gives you an adrenaline rush, here's how you do it in COVID-19 times. Get yourself a seat, grasp that wheel and get ready for the race of your life. E-racing is now the rage and the Ceylon Motorsports Club has brought the racing track home, as President Niroshan Pereira explains.
We've launched a program last year where we are trying to look at the possibility of bringing the virtual racing in folk into the real world. We launched it last year, but unfortunately after we ran 2 rounds of taking our 10 play seats to different locations to introduce this, the COVID came. And then since April we found that there was a total lockdown and there was no motorsport, might not be any motorsport this year. So we've got lots of these people who have these race gear at their houses who are practicing, and initially we only had 6. We spoke to India and did an Indo-Ceylon championship for 3 rounds, which went very well. And after that, this thing slowly grew, and today we have 35 drivers who've joined our program and are racing from different parts of the world, 2 in Australia, 2 in Singapore, 1 in Bangkok, 1 in Iraq, Maldives, Dubai. And so we've got all these guys in Sri Lankan expats, plus a whole community in Sri Lanka who band together over a weekend And we in the Ceylon Motorsports Club hosts a race room in different categories with their experience, and they all race
pretty good at the circuit. If he's been able to keep him at bay for this long with only 3 laps remaining.
Niroshan also mentions that the club is very emphatic about gender equality. One of the initiatives is Girls on Track, and also the e-racing platform promotes both males and females to race together on an even track, so to speak. And that's it for our People's Bank News Capsule. Coming up next is Selinco Life Let's Talk, tackling the sexual pandemic with Sharanya Sekaram.
With Selinco Life Pension Saver, Sri Lanka's premier retirement plan, start planning for your retirement today. Selinco Life, a relationship for life.
There is an unfinished war in Sri Lanka, and it has a 4-letter word: rape. In just 24 hours, we heard of the rape and deaths of 3 girls, all minors, a 17-year-old, a 10-year-old and a 16-month-old. And the accused were all young men under 30. In just 100 days of 2020, 54 cases of child sexual abuse were documented by police. 1 rape in every 4 hours is what Sri Lanka officially reports. In 2019, the total number of documented rape cases was 1,779. While both men and women get raped, the experience itself is traumatic enough. Documenting a rape is a brutalizing and dehumanizing process. Hence, most go unreported. The victims then most often becomes the offender. They face constant threats by the accuser if the victim is ever brave enough to identify the accuser, fear of reprisal and shame due to social stigma, and even blackmail. There are unwanted pregnancies too, as in the case of 21-year-old Dulani, a hearing-impaired woman who was gang raped and then became pregnant. She is in permanent psychiatric care. So what is the redress victims have if they come out in the open? I reached out to feminist writer, researcher and activist Sharanya Sekaram, who works with the Grassrooted Trust and is editor of Bakamunu.lk. She holds an LLB honours and a master's in conflict and peace studies and is a member of the Coalition of Feminists for Social Change, an advocacy group working globally to end violence against women and girls. She also co-founded a feminist collective, Every Story Sri Lanka. So, Sharanya, for my benefit and for everyone else's benefit, what exactly is rape?
So, under the Sri Lankan law, rape is defined very narrowly. It is the act of a penis entering a vagina without the consent of the victim in question. It's that specific and it's limited, the definition of rape is limited to that.
So, in this context, it does not include male rape?
It doesn't include anal rape, it doesn't include fingers being inserted, foreign objects being inserted. That all comes under sexual assault as per the law.
In your work, what are the most horrific instances of rape that you have come across?
So I think you see a lot of, we've seen foreign objects being used, we've seen fingers being used, we've seen gang rape, which I think is, for me, one of the more brutalizing forms, because that means there are other people involved in this scenario, right? It's not one person trusting their own judgment or their own feelings. It's a group of people. And for me, I find that particularly jarring. I think rape of children, infants also kind of hits hard. But for me personally, also rape of very, very old women is something that I have never quite been able to grapple with, because with all the conditioning we have around rape culture, this is one thing that defies all of that on a very fundamental level.
In our country, rape is recognized only if a penis enters a vagina without consent. However, how would then a male who is raped file a complaint?
So you would file the complaint under sexual assault, which is the next section in the penal code and actually carries a very similar term. So we define rape socially and sort of academically as one thing, and legally it's framed another way, which is not to say that if you are a male who suffered anal rape or foreign objects or through fingering, that doesn't mean you have no recourse in the law whatsoever. You would bring the complaint officially under sexual assault, and then the procedure would be fairly similar to that of traditional quote-unquote rape.
So if a rape victim wants to make a complaint, how are rapes documented? How are these complaints documented?
So this is particularly interesting because the police take very detailed data down with all of the crimes, and it's published on police.lk under the grave crimes abstract, so anyone can go and have a look. And the police actually categorize rape in 3 categories. One is regular rape, which is where it involves a woman over the age of 16. Then there is statutory rape without consent, which involves a minor. So if you're under 16, you can't consent to sex, period. That's rape in the eyes of the law. The third thing they do is they categorize it as rape with consent. And as we've had conversations with police, what they do is they've created a separate category for rape complaints that are made without the victim saying, I was raped. So you have a lot of underage relationships where the parents make a complaint. This happens a lot in queer relationships. So that the police make this, and in fact, if you look at the statistics for 2019, that's the largest proportion of complaints is rape of a 16 or under with consent. So it's where the minor in question is saying, I wasn't raped, I consented to this act. But in the eyes of the law, it's rape. So it's not the police trying to be clever, they're also trying to find a way to show these distinctions that it's not as black and white as we think.
I see a huge cultural abyss here. Is that it?
It is, and I think also what we forget when you work with the police and you deal with police stations regularly, you'll understand it's like a machine. So they're given frameworks, and a lot of the time they're also trying to work within the frameworks they've been given. It's very like, here's the law, here's the procedure. There isn't a lot of room they're not given training on social introspection or even the statistics. They're given a form and they're told tick, 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 and then somebody else counts the form later. So it's not like they're sitting there thinking about it. They're told, here's the form, you fill the form. That's their training, no? And then somebody takes those forms and fills the statistics, then each police station submits it to the district and the district collects it and it's made national data. So we have this impression they're sitting around and kind of being like, oh, they don't have a lot of say in this system either. So they're also functioning within the sort of forces framework that they're given, which is a problem in itself.
In this whole process, how do the laws stack up, whether it's the police or the judicial system? How does it stack up for the victim?
So for the victim, it's a brutal, dehumanizing process because that is how criminal justice is. It is, you go and make a complaint, you have to then have a judicial medical officer examine you. And think about this, right? A person who's just been brutalized, you sort of have to answer these very clinical questions of where were you, what time was it, how many times did it happen? So you have to give this evidence. And what's even worse is that it's a long procedure in Sri Lanka. So it's a 14-year process often, and a lot of victims will drop out of the process because it's again and again. Then think about children, think about those who are under 16 years, think about those who are very young. There's a lot of reform that needs to happen with human empathy at the core of it, not so much looking at a system and what are the words we use, efficient and practical, but thinking that there's a human being suffering in the middle of all this, and that is what our primary concern should be.
So Sharanya, as a society, there are increasing incidences of rape. As a society, what do you think we need to do?
Education, education, more education. We don't discuss these subjects in schools. There is no lessons on empathy, on consent, on trust, self-respect, self-esteem. School children are not taught that their bodies are theirs, that nobody should be violating and touching their bodies. We don't talk about relationships. I cannot tell you the amount of cases we've come across of young women being blackmailed by their boyfriends into having sex, so being raped, where they're too afraid to tell their parents because now they have to tell their parents they have a boyfriend. Relationships between children and parents. Are you the thing your child is most afraid of? Are you the person they are so afraid to turn to they'd rather go through this horrible sort of experience and pain? And this all comes down to having conversations and teaching children about healthy relationships as early as possible. Unpacking that, what they should expect from a partner, what they shouldn't, how to treat another person. That is how we change things.
So are you the thing your child is most afraid of, that your child would much rather suffer rape? The more we build awareness, the more we can stop this scourge. Rape has no age barrier, nor does it have a gender barrier. It's catastrophically ubiquitous. It could be you, it could be me, it could be your brother, sister, spouse, mom, dad, or your child. Fight for reform. Change the way people think. Stand up and say no to rape.
With Salinco Life Pension Saver, Sri Lanka's premier retirement plan, start planning for your retirement today. Salinco Life, a relationship for life.
Come and join me at the Asylum Lounge Bar and Restaurant as mixologist Isura Jayatilaka whips up a Lovi Ceylon cocktail in just 60 seconds. Whatever time it is time for a cocktail somewhere. Here's mixologist at Asylum Lounge Bar and Restaurant shaking up a signature Lovi Ceylon cocktail.
Hi, today we are making our signature cocktail Lovi Ceylon. The ingredients are Rockland V extract and passion cordial and lime and cherry syrup. And we are putting 50 ml V extract. Then we are putting 40 ml passion cordial. Then we are putting 5 ml lime juice. Put it ice and shake. Then we are putting ice hourglass.
Thank you. So that is the Lovi Ceylon made by the mixologist of the asylum, Isura. Cheers. So that's it for this week. If you want to give us any feedback or suggestions or stories you would like to see, please email us on kaleidoscope1@gmail.com. And if you like to watch us on Let's Talk or Life in 60 or our news capsule clips, you'll find it on our playlist on YouTube. Or simply subscribe to Kaleidoscope with Savithri Rodrigo and join us weekly. So until next week, be sensible when you go out. It's important not just for your safety, but for everyone else's too. Now, here's your Kaleidoscope takeaway. If you're offered a seat on a rocket ship, don't ask what seat, just get on.